Tonight, I thought it'd be a lot of fun if we talked about our top 5 Spielberg films. Now, how do you compare a film like Saving Private Ryan or Schindler's List to Hook and The Terminal? So we
understand how much of a killer that is. Like, instead of Rufy, the guy's looking at a list and sees the name Rufio on it. Like, that shit gets started real quick.
It Stephanie says there, just 5. Yes. I'm going to give my 5 and Kyle's going to give his 5. So I'm kind of curious to see if we have similar top 5s. I have a feeling it might be the case, but specifically, we're going to be talking about his more mainstream popcorn films. Yes. We'll save the dramas and the historical dramas for another episode. I think that it'll be easier to rank them this way. And just to show, here is the list we'll be pulling from, starting with Duel in 1971, Jaws, Close Encounters, 1941, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, Always, Hook, Jurassic Park, Lost World, AI, Minority Report, Catch Me If You Can, The Terminal, War of the Worlds, that coaster that came with my Indiana Jones box set, Adventures of Tintin, the BFG, and Ready Player One. What we're saving for the next time we revisit this are these films as follow. Now, Kyle, before we start, talk to me a little bit about your experiences with Steven Spielberg. And not in person, but...
Well, yes, I shook his hand and he said, "You have a mighty grip. Were you an offensive lineman?" No. Listen, when it comes to the Spielberg, first of all, that's an Animaniac. Shout out for those who don't know. If you don't know, you better ask somebody. It's called YouTube. Anyways, no, but I mean, whenever it's a Spielberg film, you're at least going to have fun, even if it's a dark movie. Like, there are fun moments in Private Ryan, okay? That's a fact. But I wasn't about to put it in this. Listen, if the opening of your movie has a door to a boat coming down or a bay to a boat coming down and it shows numerous soldiers getting shredded, I don't think you're a popcorn flick. I'm just going to throw that out there, okay? But just, I assume lighthearted and fun, and when he's not impeded by people who can't write scripts like George Lucas, smart too.
My first experience with Steven Spielberg came from a photograph that I saw in TV Guide when I was very, very young, and it was such a powerful image that it caused me to track down and watch his films. So seeing this image made me think these are important movies that I need to see. And I'll explain what that image was as we go through our list. So Kyle, I'm going to start with number 5. What is your pick?
Well, first of all, I make all the jokes about it as I do, but listen, if you have Steven Spielberg and you are going to associate him with a DJ hype call, none other matches Rufy. Oh, okay. Of course, then if you say it as Dustin Hoffman as the captain himself, Rufy. Oh, it's very ominous. But I have Hook at number 5. There is so much in that movie that just went right. Listen, we can talk about good casting all day, and people will give Dustin Hoffman, listen, Dusty did his thing. The immortal Robin Williams, as the kid who won't grow up, it writes itself. But the one that was more challenging, one could argue, to find and delivered, listen, somebody else may have been able to fake their way to being adult Peter, though probably wouldn't have done as good as Robin Williams. Somebody else may have had good form in playing Captain Hook. But at the end of the day, no one could have done Smee as well as Bob Hoskins. That whole situation, child actors, all of it.
That chemistry, holy crap.
Yes. If there were any more chemistry, there would be explosions on set. The only explosion, and of course, being Julian Roberts with her off-camera issues in her personal life.
They did blow up that toy boat.
That's true. They also blew up Tinkerbell's house, technically speaking, as well. But that's a whole other question. But man, even the music is fantastic.
That's as far as I'm concerned, The music is probably one of the best scores in the entire Spielberg John Williams pantheon. The score for that film is in places it's very haunting. It's soaring. You could almost tell that it was written to be a musical at first.
Yeah, I mean, how do you mix wonder and horror together? It's something you have to do because at some point you have to have Peter and the Lost Boys and you have to have Hook and the Pirates. And those, you can't write the same song to suit them both. And yet they find a way.
At one point we are going to do required viewing on some of these Spielberg films, so we're not going to be going through and doing like full reviews of them. I really enjoy Hook for a lot of the aspects that you just said. I enjoy the performances. Dustin Hoffman, Bob Hoskins, incredible. Robin Williams. It's Robin Williams, and the score. There are a couple of flaws in that film, but as far as like nostalgic movies, it's one of those films, and I've heard it said many times before on the internet, and it's one of the things I agree with. It's a flawed film, but one that everybody just loves.
Fair.
My number 5 is Jurassic Park. My God, let me get that. Just in case you don't know what Jurassic Park is, here's the poster. It's the best dinosaur movie ever made, other than Grumpy Old Men, which is a classic.
I see what you did there.
Effects that have aged better than movies made from 1 year ago, and a great cast of color-coded clad actors.
Listen, let's be clear, bro. You missed an opportunity there. You turned around and talked about, what was it, Grumpy Old Men or whatever, being dinosaurs. Hey, and the dinosaurs aged better than Walter Matthau did. There you go.
Walter Matthau always looked lovably old. I'll leave it at that. I stand by that. I mean, it's kind of funny as the years kind of progress. I tend to find the scenes earlier in the film when they're discussing the horrors of the theme park concoctions to be much more fascinating than the action. But overall, extremely strong film. It keeps amping up. I'm not a big fan of what followed it.
Who is?
But as far as the original Jurassic Park, I mean, that, as far as I'm concerned, that is one of the top 5 blockbusters of the decade, let alone top 5 Spielberg.
Bigger letdown of the series, Jurassic Park or Alien?
No, Jurassic Park, because Alien had aliens, and nothing that came after Jurassic Park it came close to that first film.
Yeah,
including Spielberg's own Lost World. It had its moments, but
I have to agree.
Charlie says, I never realized it was Dustin Hoffman for longer than I want to admit. He does blend into that role. And he there's an aspect of relishment in that performance that you rarely see from Dustin Hoffman in many of his other roles. It's an amazing performance overall.
Most bigger surprise, Dustin Hoffman as Hook or Dustin Hoffman as Mumbles?
Dustin Hoffman as Dustin Hoffman. Mumbles is too small of a part to make that comparison, though.
True. I mean, you do have the top billing that would reveal it. But I would say Mumbles just in general, because I feel like he altered himself a lot more to be Mumbles.
I love the cast in that film too, but it left such an impact that you not only remember that smaller character, you remember his names, you remember the performance. So it was effective for sure. Hook is a half an hour too long. I actually kind of agree with Daniel on that one. Stephanie says, welcome to Jurassic Park. Jim says, dude, number 5. I think he's talking about Jurassic Park. Well, it's because of my next top 4 are even great. Listen, when it comes to this list, we're comparing some of the best films of the best. All right. In some of these cases, I'm sure that the films can be somewhat interchangeable but for the time being, this is where they're going to be. So moving on to number 4, Kyle.
So for this entire analysis, one could argue that we're going to need a bigger boat, which is a great segue into my number 4. I have Jaws. Listen, pardon my bias for being a scuba diver when, the world isn't filled with pandemic and I'm allowed to leave the damn house. But Jaws was something that not only blew the minds of people in a way, it actually gave a negative stigma to a species that's only dangerous when you do the wrong thing. It's funny how much they have to they have training out there for divers to be like, listen, sharks suck. So long as you're not bleeding or messing with them, they don't want anything to do with you.
Yeah, you regularly go to the shark's house.
According to TJ, yes. But because of that, because of Jaws, Tokyo Jameson has been allowed to believe that the shark's house is scary.
Well, I'm not even going to follow up on that too much because my number 4 happens to be Jaws.
Apparently another reason we're going to need a bigger boat.
The most intense and satisfying movie about fishing ever crafted. A great male bonding adventure pairing the reluctant everyman with the obsessed hunter and the sarcastic scientist. I mean, let's talk about this cast for 1 second. I mean, Richard Dreyfuss, holy crap. Robert Shaw, Roy Scheider. I mean, it's kind of funny when you watch interviews with Spielberg and he's talking about Jaws and he kind of refers to it as a comedy.
It has moments.
It has its moments, and there are a lot of hilarious moments and miss the heart. Oddly enough, Jaws never scared me that much when I was a kid. I was much more pulled into the drama and the tension surrounding the issue that they were facing, and just almost the futility of one little boat going out to try to capture one shark that is able to drag the boat around like you're dragging around a water skier.
Yeah.
The inventiveness that Spielberg had to take because of the mechanical shark nicknamed Bruce having the issues that it had. In many ways, a lot of the greatest tension in Jaws, I think, is a happy accident because they had to be creative and think outside the box, and it captured lightning in a bottle.
Hey, listen, all I can tell you is the one scene that I found scary, because I'm with you, a lot of it was the tension and all that for me as well. The one scene I found scary is the one that everybody does. I mean, like I was constantly regaled by the story.
Spoilers, I guess.
What's that?
Spoilers, I should say.
Yeah, well, it's not really a spoiler. I mean, there's a shark, but like it's the big reveal is what I'll say, and it's what happens before the bigger boat line. Everybody knows the bigger boat line, so yeah. But my dad used to inform me that you're going to need a bigger boat line is one of the most missed in Hollywood because what happens beforehand induces so much fear and screams. Heck, my mom even got scared and was like, and like all hugged up on my dad. They were on a date, right? So that because that was all going in the first watch for that generation, you missed. You're going to need a bigger boat. But
it was the first close reveal of the shark.
Right. And listen, here's where I give Scheider credit. If somebody was going to take a face, an expression off a person as to what fireball looks like, that's it. Okay? There you go.
Roy Scheider was probably one of the most underrated actors of his era.
The only way to improve Jaws outright is if they had the opportunity to do a DVD commentary using Steve Irwin.
Wolf Cool, we need a bigger boat. Jaws, the first one is the only good movie. I definitely agree. I think that the second one is watchable. I don't think the second one is a bad film. It's mediocre.
Watchable.
Yeah, it has Roy Scheider, and Roy Scheider, once again, almost makes anything watchable. And oddly enough, the ride that used to be at Universal, the entire ending of that ride was based on the ending of that second film. Brian, it should be a top leader. Once again, if somebody were to come to me and say Jaws was their number one, I would not argue. these are the types of films that we're dealing with as far as I'm concerned. I think Jaws should be in the top 3, says Charlie. Stephanie says, I'm surprised that movie even got made after the shark stopped working and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's the thinking outside the box. You have to finish this film. What do we do? And the creative solution they came up with, I think, made the film what it is today, outside of the performances.
How many stories are there about horror or suspense movies having to overcome either a low budget or some sort of, MacGuffin adversity to then make them great because it draws more from the actors, man? It's a time story that happens time and again.
And it was a lesson that Spielberg knew and learned for a lot of his early films, is to keep the monster unseen for as long as possible. It's something that he did in Close Encounters. It's something that he did with the power of the Ark in Raiders.
Night Shyamalan does it well in Signs.
Okay. Green Mobster, I haven't swam outside of a swimming pool in 20 years because of Jaws. I always get close to the water with my son, then the theme plays in my head, and that stops all progress. Literally 20 years.
We need to get him and his son to see Moana. That might make you feel better about the ocean.
Moving on to number 3, Kyle.
So a lot of people may have seen this pick coming, but it belongs somewhere in the top 5. And the people that might get mad about this, but I think it's an element of bias that it's a newer movie. I think that even it's ahead of its time with the commentary it was making. I can understand why people hate on Tom Cruise because he's kind of nuts. But I put Minority Report on this list. There's so many little things, so many little details, so much stuff I enjoy, so many things that it portrays that are possible that I'd like to see in computers but won't happen because business is business. Who could really hate on a movie where Tilda Swinton is somewhere involved? I don't know if she's done a bad movie. At least none of the ones I've seen have been. So, yeah, I got Minority Report in there. Just like I said, there's so many small details that they get right in there. That just keep you going along from the whole wood grain of the wooden spheres they carved into and all that, and the eye scans and all that. I enjoy it thoroughly. So yeah, I put Minority Report at 3.
Minority Report is great. It's up there with Catch It If You Can and Munich, I think, as some of his best films from that decade. My only issues with that film, I think that the third act is a little weak, but that can also be dependent on how you interpret the third act, and I'll leave it at that. When he said Tom Cruise Spielberg film, I'm like, I hope he doesn't go War of the Worlds on me.
Please, Demos. You can accuse me of a lot of things, but I'm not the one that said Major League wasn't required reading.
I recommended it. But no, Minority Report is a film that I think a lot of people have been talking about a lot more recently, especially when it comes to the idea of pre-crime or thought crime. That's one of those films that I think that is going to have not the supernatural aspect of it, but it's prescient in many, many ways, and it's a film I very much enjoy. My number 4, if you're talking about tone, is by far the opposite of Minority Report. I'm talking E.T., the Extraterrestrial. It's the best boy and his dog movie of all time, from training the puppy to your domestic life to sending him to the farm at the end. Joyous and uplifting.
Okay, that's a very interesting description, but I really think you picked it because the school has Indiana Jones as a principal.
Oh, that's a deleted scene, so that would be a cheat. No, we talked about E.T. Oddly enough. We talked about it last week, and we mentioned the fact of the darkness of some of the scenes. It's frightening in many aspects, and it's one of the only films from my childhood that I know this is gonna sound corny. Okay, but I probably wouldn't watch in the middle of the night. That scene.
Short Circuit 2?
Well, Short Circuit 2 is frightening in its own way, but having the monstrosity of this alien creature popping out in the middle of the night from the cornrows in the fog, to me is much more frightening than Johnny Five. E.T. it's masterful, and it's one of the occasions where the reason why I'm not talking about the scores in many of these films is for the obvious reason. Practically all of these have some of the best scores in cinematic history. We can do an entire video. Picking John Williams' top 5 would be much more harder than picking Spielberg's top 5 for me.
Demos, I would need more than 2 days for that assignment. I'm just throwing that out there.
That would be that would be the toughest, one of the toughest challenges I would take upon the show. Maybe we'll do it now. But
thanks, Demos.
The marriage and the emotional uplift that you get in E.T. from its score, especially the bike scenes and the original escape from the police officers with shotguns, not walkie-talkies, is just one of my favorite moments from a film as a child, and one of my favorite moments in a film as an adult. Overall, fantastic film. Charlie, speaking on Tom Cruise, so long as he's a good actor who really cares what his personal life is like, and if you are talking about Tom Cruise, I agree. You should separate art from the person.
Yes.
And anybody that does the stunts that he does for the Mission Impossible films alone, I have some respect for. The same reason I have a lot of respect for Jackie Chan and what he did. Stephanie, Charlie, some people won't watch an actor or actress because of their personal life, which is stupid. And that's the best thing about America and our freedom here. If you don't want to, you don't have to.
Boom.
Green Mofsa, is there a version with guns in it available? From my understanding, and this is one of the things I respected about Spielberg and that ticked me off about George Lucas's approach, when Spielberg did the special edition of E.T. and then released it on DVD, it had both versions. It had the special edition and it had the original version. To my knowledge, the original version of E.T. has always been available with every release. If I'm wrong, please let me know. But at least as far as my DVD copy, when it came out for the anniversary edition, it had both options available.
At the end of the day, still not as bad as Greedo shooting first.
I don't think, and to be honest, I think that's George Lucas's biggest misstep. I don't think people would give a damn about all this if he released both versions. Here's the original version. Here's my special edition. Have at it. Hell, even Ridley Scott and his 8 different cuts of Blade Runner, at least he makes them all available. And I think he does this so he can charge $200. So you have to buy 8 movies to get the Blu-ray edition. But the collector's box.
Hey, you'll be asleep by Act 2 in all of them, so who cares?
Number 2, Kyle.
Well, somebody earlier complained about the placement of a certain movie on your list, and somebody earlier uttered something about a Patreon edit-free version, so to speak. And I believe this person was so concerned with whether we can, he didn't stop to think whether we should. I have Jurassic Park at number 2. Listen, aside from the dinosaurs, which of course were great, how many wonderful one-liners do you have? Dr. Ian Malcolm, listen, I know there's a reason why he was made the main protagonist in The Lost World, and it's not Jeff Goldblum's fault that movie failed. Listen, the Apartments.com guy, the Grandmaster, he doesn't make movies bad, okay? That's just a fact of life. I don't care. If I got any thirstier about Jeff Goldblum, you'd have to call HR, Demos. But what I'll say about this is, he's not the only good performance. Say what you will. They would, maybe they spared no expense bringing in all this cast. See what I did there? But
Richard Attenborough, man.
Yeah, for the win. Laura Dern isn't in a lot, but this is definitely how I remember her name when I see her.
Not Blue Velvet?
Anyway, so, but, and of course, Sam Neill is Dr. Grant. Of course, he's supposed to be the straight man, but has his moments as well. The scene at the beginning establishing his character, where he very incorrectly and factually and accurately describes how lethal the carnivore of the velociraptor is to the kid, is a great scene, hands down. The movie in its entirety is fantastic, and not just because of the effects, although they do provide that spice that make it fantastic.
They may have spared no expense, but they used the dinosaurs sparingly, which was a good move.
They spared no expense, but hey, listen, when dinosaurs ruled the earth and the dinosaurs ruled, That said, when it was their turn to do so, I agree. And oh crap, and as far as scores go, listen, Jurassic Parks is another one that's a true winner.
We were talking earlier about underrated actors, and I have to point out now, I think that Bob Peck as Muldoon is underrated in that film. I thought he was fantastic, and if there's one change that was made from the book regarding his character, that's probably the change that made me really sad, because he's badass in the film, but his character is much more badass in the book. And I think a lot of people are agreeing with you. Oh my God, yes, definitely top 3, says Charlie. Stephanie says, Kyle, great, number 2 choice. Sam Neill, Richard Attenborough, Laura Dern, Samuel L. Jackson, such a great cast. Even Nedry and Muldoon are amazing. Thank you, Jim.
Hello, man.
This is probably going to be the most shocking pick for me, because I think a lot of people would have expected this.
See, if I had known you were going to make a shocking pick for 2, I would have segued with a hold on to your butts.
I think a lot of people would have expected this to be my number 1, but it is by a tiny margin that could possibly change tomorrow. It is by a tiny margin my number 2, and that is Raiders of the Lost Ark, the ultimate adventure film, mystery, romance, action, whips, fedoras, and the wrath of God. No Tom Selleck mustache, though. I love this film. I've talked about this film way too much on this channel. And if I start right now, I'd keep going on for an hour. Yes, I still think it's the best Indiana Jones film. The chemistry between him and Harrison Ford and John Rhys-Davies, fantastic. Marion, great. Nazi monkey. Okay.
No, it is fantastic. And as a matter of fact, what I'm going to put as a disclaimer is somebody at some point made a rule that said we weren't going to have 2 of the same franchise in our lineup. So, yeah, I don't have Raiders on my list, but it certainly gets an honorable mention.
Oh, that's it. That should be interesting. Last Crusade was so much better, says Jim. Charlie says, I liked it. Charlie also says, Kali Ma. That's Temple of Doom, but I appreciate it nevertheless. Don't know about number 2, but definitely top 10. Interesting. Wolfcool says, Raiders and Last Crusade are the best. And plus, Temple of Doom is not a sequel. It's a prequel. That is very true. And in the future, if we do one of the projects I've been hinting at from our Briscoe County Junior videos, we may be doing Indiana Jones in a certain chronological order, and I'll leave it at that. It is time, before we get to number 1, let's talk about some of our honorable mentions. Kyle, go for it.
Sure. Listen, first of all, Raiders gets its love, no question. I mean, I never thought E.T. was a great movie per se, but you, of course, have to give its love and do a little honorable mention action on that as well. I mean, obviously, we're talking about Spielberg films. If we were talking historical stuff, I definitely would have thrown love and a half at Private Ryan. We all know that the Spielberg is really big into war movies in general, and that's kind of how we got his start as a kid. Is filming little battle scenes and stuff like that where they would step on a stick to make sand fly in the air to simulate an explosion, and they wouldn't evolve to use tricks like that in Private Ryan. Can't include it, but I had to. After all, how many movies have Tom Hanks, Ted Danson, Paul Giamatti, and Nathan Fillion in them all at the same time?
And Vin Diesel.
Sprinkle in a little bit of Barry Pepper. Yeah, I get they have the Iron Giant in there, but his character in that movie ticked me off.
Well, you'll get your chance to talk about when we do our top 5 dramatic films. For me, as we mentioned before, Catch Me If You Can, extremely underrated, great film.
The Terminal gets a little bit of honorable mention love as well.
Not a big fan of The Terminal. I have to admit. I think that the interesting thing is that. For me, Spielberg, since the 2000s, I think that one of the weaknesses of his films is he's had trouble with some of his endings. And The Terminal is definitely one of those films where I think the ending felt very deflated. Catch You If You Can, that's the only part of the film where I felt like it didn't quite nail its ending.
Kind of like North by Northwest.
North by Northwest ends after the action is done. The epilogue was the joke. Duel. It was a made-for-TV movie he did in 1971, but it's been described as Jaws on the road. Very underrated. If you haven't seen Duel, check it out. No big names in it, at least from today's point of view, but it is a captivating thriller. I definitely very much recommend it. And obviously, I have to do an honorable mention to the only other two Indiana Jones films. And
there's only 3 of them. I don't know why you keep having to justify yourself.
There's this dark specter that just looms around me whenever I mention Indiana Jones. It looks like a prairie dog. I don't know why.
I'll go ahead and drop it. Listen, for those who don't know, just because Demos has some sort of a wacky fetish for adventures and secret agents, he's not the only one that's going to throw love at Indy. I don't own a fedora, but if I did, I'd be paying tribute all the same. My top film, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which, by the way, the fact that Demos doesn't like this movie for is baffling in itself.
Whoa. I love this movie.
Hold on, not as much as Raiders is what I'm trying to imply.
Okay.
But for the record, let's be clear, it features both Indiana Jones and James Bond in it. The only other movie that can claim that is Cowboys vs. Aliens, okay? But there's a whole load of things going on. You can say what you will about he didn't have an ensemble in Raiders. Well, yeah, he kind of did. It just got bigger by the time we had The Last Crusade. So much going on. His time, even when he's not interacting with Sean Connery in a buddy cop kind of role, air quotes, when he's chilling with Dr. Elsa Schneider, he's doing great stuff with a sidekick. I mean, listen.
She talks in her sleep.
She talks. Yeah. Your situation hasn't improved. No, but what I'm trying to say is it's one thing to do a bad accent. It's another thing to pretend to do a really bad accent. And that's even the links that Indiana Jones went in this movie. Listen, if you don't subscribe to this, if you didn't buy something at the gate, I'm just going to walk up to you and ask for tickets, please. And when you don't have it, I'm just going to tell everyone, no ticket. That's all I'm saying.
The chemistry, I've said this 1,000 times before, but the chemistry between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery makes that film. It is my favorite of the Indiana Jones films. I just think that Raiders is the better film from...
Your face is a better film.
Well, yeah. Well, how come they're not paying me the $1 million? I'm right here, Hollywood. Come and get me.
Catch him if you can.
That's good. But it's a damn good film. For me, but once again, you mentioned, the fact that this film has James Bond and Indiana Jones in it. How can it not be, at the top of my list? And that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
It's integrity, my friend. It's integrity. Despite Bond and Indy being together, I have to go with what I feel is a better film. I'm kind of curious, Kyle, after everything we've been through on Hilarity by Default, what do you think my number one is?
I think you're going to say AI just to spite Jim.
I'm not that mean. My number one is Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal. No,
it's not.
No. It is, in fact, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Hauntingly beautiful ending. The film is an operatic beacon of hope and the frontiers of human exploration. We did probably one of my favorite required viewings that we've ever done was on Close Encounters. And the ending of that film captures a very rare feeling that I've ever experienced watching any other. Something that is both terrifying and significantly beautiful. It's almost, and I know it's going to sound silly, but watching that ending is almost like a religious experience. It is moving, and it's almost incomparable for me. When I was a kid, I'm gonna bookend here with what I said at the beginning. I was flipping through TV Guide and I saw the still of, and Stranger Things ripped this off or paid homage to it in one of its posters, but saw the still of the young boy with the door open and this big otherworldly orange glow coming in, spilling into the house. And I'm like, what is this? You know, it is a journey into the unknown. And what makes Close Encounters much more interesting for me is that we're not talking ghosts, we're not talking vampires, we're talking about alien life, something that logically can exist. Now, whether you believe that UFOs and all that, yeah, okay, I'm not a believer in all that stuff, but logically speaking, it is within the realm of possibility. So it's like touching the hand of God. That film, not to mention the performances, specifically Richard Dreyfuss, the plight that character goes through in that movie, getting to the point where the obsession, he abandons his own family to follow this. It's a storyline that you wouldn't see in a film made today. It's very daring to do that, and it's not one that I agree with. That I was like, oh yeah, that's a good moral. No. But it does add a dark layer of truth to the human condition, and what lies ahead of it, perhaps. Overall, it's a fantastic film, and that's that. I can keep going on and on about it, but I think I've made my point very clear. What are your thoughts on Close Encounters?
Listen, when it comes to Close Encounters, some of the feels that you feel is a good reason to put it at the top. I find it to be a movie of many moments put together, which does not make it bad. That's why I don't have it as number one. But man, there's some iconic stuff in there, right? Like, listen, I'm not going to say a word. I'm just going to do this. You already know what I'm talking about. So, and the moving experience for me, as much as you talk about that orange glow and it deserves its props, that moment where they start to lock in, that progression of chords is them actually trying to communicate through music, and they set up that big apparatus, whatever you want to call it, to communicate with the ship, and then you get that first, and like they got the question and the answer, and then somewhere in there comes a blah, blah. Like, that's where I start feeling the move and the tingles and all that other stuff, because it doesn't have. There are musicians who will tell you that sort of chord happiness is in itself a religious experience. But like when they start to do that and that all happens, and then the machines start to interact and stuff blows apart and all this other stuff, that to me was the great part, and it leads into your orange glow. So hey, for me, that's the cigarette after the climax.
And think about John Williams. Within 2 years, he went from dun-dun, dun-dun to da-da-da-da-da. So he progressed. He added a few notes. It was fantastic. But
added 3 notes. Booyah!
No. But joking aside, how much as a composer, how much he was able to accomplish with that simplicity.
Absolutely. And he didn't even have blah in his repertoire.
He did it first, and he did it with Aliens. So Wolfcool says Matt Damon was in Saving Private Ryan. Yes, Matt Damon shows up secretly in a lot of films.
Matt Damon.
I don't want to name them all, but from other sci-fi adventures to some teenage college fat comedies. So Matt Damon
in our episodes as well, I come to notice.
Green Mops, there are 4, but Kingdom of the Crystal Skull isn't acknowledged by pretty much everyone. Yes, Charlie says, oh no, Cowboys vs. Aliens. That was so bad. I don't think it was terrible. I thought it was mediocre. I don't think it's that bad, but it could be. I think it's a case where my bias for both actors makes it a little bit more enjoyable, but overall I think the film is unstrikingly mediocre. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all the great feedback. I know that some of you disagreed with our top 5, but that's what we're here for. We're here for the discussion. We're here to be told that we're wrong and to see all the accompanying face palms in the chat at our terrible but hilarious by default jokes. Kyle, do you have any parting words?
Thanks for having us aboard. Listen, we go into these things thinking we're only going to go for an hour, and then you guys come in with your awesome comments and banter and have us running a lot longer. So thanks for that.
If you guys like this channel, please share it with your friends. Invite them to join us in the chats every night, and we'll try to build a community right here, where I dare say that life is hilarious by default, even if Jim Linehan says that we're just tolerable. Thanks, buddy. Knowing Jim, that is the greatest compliment we can receive.
Tolerable.